Welcome back into the Illini Inquirer podcast, and let's get to know a lot about our Illinois' week one opponent, even though it's their game two opponent, UTSA. And I find this program really interesting. I think their coach, I think a lot of fans have been, listening to his press conference this week and be like, man, this guy's really likable. He seems like he's got his stuff together, and he had a really good first season at UTSA. But JJ Perez, he writes for Inside runnersports.com, part of the 24/7 sports crew. And JJ, I don't know how many people up here know that much about UTSA, but you went to UTSA, and it's not a very long football history here, but it seems like one of those programs that is certainly on the rise. So can you fill us in a little bit about this football program? Because it's really interesting in one big media market, and with a lot of talent in that state of Texas. Seems like they got a lot of potential there.
Yeah, definitely they still in the startup phase. I wouldn't say, the initial startup, but this is year number 11, season 11 for the Roadrunners. They're going to kick off this Saturday. So still climbing the mountain of what a Division I program should look like. But, in the short history, in the 10 years, two bowl appearances, haven't won a bowl game yet. That's still on the checklist of things to accomplish. Trying to compete for a conference title. They were independent the first few seasons. They went into the Western Athletic Conference for one season. That was a season where realignment kind of got crazy, and they got an invite to Conference USA, and that's where they've been these last few years. So just kind of going along, trying to build the recruiting base. San Antonio's fertile recruiting ground, South Texas, DFW, Houston, kind of the whole state. They're just trying to get their name out, and they've done a pretty good job under Jeff Traylor. They've committed to, recruiting San Antonio, recruiting Texas, and some of that stuff is starting to pay dividends. And it's a young program. There are not a lot of household names on the team, although, there's an All-American running back and, a few good dynamic, skilled position players. But, program on the rise. First-year head coach Jeff Traylor, second-year head coach Jeff Traylor's first-time head coach. So, he's kind of still learning on the job and, doing what, the different duties that a head coach has and learning all that stuff. So, like you said, definitely a young program, but, a lot to be optimistic this season.
So what's like the fan base like there, given that it's such a young program that, had, its second bowl game last year and a very successful pandemic season. So what is the fan base like, and how much have they put into this football program?
It's very passionate. If you ever come across the folks on UTSA Twitter, they love their Roadrunners, and like most other programs, Group of Five programs, low Power Five, sometimes there's some infighting and whatnot, but that's just due to the passion that they have. And recently, just this summer, UTSA was able to open a new $40 million athletic facility that's transformed their academic space and athletic space, from nothing to what they have now. So a lot of that came from donations with the fans and working with local businesses, and just building that fan base, alumni base. And UTSA as a school is pretty young as well. The school started in the 60s, so there aren't hundreds of years of generations of families and money and donors and alumni. So all that stuff still kind of being built here in San Antonio.
Yeah, and as like a White Sox fan in the Chicagoland area, like I understand, like if you're a UTSA fan, like you own it, right? Because you're there's not very many of you, so I imagine that fan base kind of just owns it. Like, this is my team. I got in on them before they were like a mainstream rock band, right?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge part of it. The startup, everybody feels like UTSA is going to be a sleeping giant in the Group of Five, and everybody that supports it, they wanna be on the front side of that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about Jeff Traylor. You mentioned it, a really interesting history, never been a head coach at the college level before, comes from high school football in Texas, which we know is basically small school college football, based on some of the schools and the resources they put into there. But what has he brought to the program? Because year one, I think they were picked to finish last in Conference USA, and they go 7-5. So how has he made an impact on that program?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he definitely has the credentials to be a big time someday, a Power Five, coach out there. I mean, he was recruiter of the year a few times. He was at Texas under Charlie Strong. He was at Arkansas. So he certainly has the pedigree. I mean, he's a tireless recruiter. I mean, that's what he's hung his hat on, and he's pretty good at it. So that's kind of what he's brought to UTSA, and he's kind of built his staff around that. And he did really well last year, all things considered. I mean, a first year coaching staff, they didn't even get to see their players hit the field until a few weeks before the season started. So they were still installing stuff as the season started, and it was just kind of get to the game, and there weren't a lot of schemes and stuff. So they've had a year together, and now things are just that much better. But just to circle back on Coach Traylor, I mean, he's you watch his interviews, you wouldn't know that he's a high school legend. I mean, the high school he coached at, they named the stadium after him. And you go to East Texas, everybody knows his name. So in the high school community throughout Texas, just his name carries a lot of weight. So that's really helped on the recruiting trail, to be honest with you. And everybody knows that's the biggest thing when it comes to getting a program off the ground.
Yeah, Gilmer High School in Texas. And for Illini fans, we heard years of Big Sandy from Lovie Smith. He started as an assistant coach at Big Sandy before going to Texas, SMU, Arkansas, right after Bielema left there. So, yeah, just a really interesting history. And just from the YouTube clip, seems like a guy that can recruit, I would imagine, out there in the trail. And he said nice things about Illinois, but obviously expectations after last year, JJ, probably increased a little bit. So what are the expectations for UTSA, not only coming into this season opener for them at a Big Ten school, but for the whole season?
So 7 wins last season, that tied the most the program has ever won in their history. So they want to get there. The expectations, I've seen 8 wins, 9 wins. I saw someone write the other day 10 wins, and some of that stuff is, I mean, it's, to be honest, it's unfair. I mean, UTSA have won score games last year that could have gone either way. I mean, they could have easily only won 2 games. They could have easily won 10 games last year. So it just comes down to end of the game execution. You know how those things go, who makes the least amount of mistakes, turnovers, etc. But the thing we talked with Coach today about is they haven't shied away from the expectations. They talk about it, they realize it, they take it with a grain of salt because the experts, so-called, they picked them last year. So who knows, who really knows? But no, they're not afraid of it. And, they're trying to get, like I said, for the 3rd time in program history, win the bowl game. I think that's probably the number one goal of this team, and then try to compete for the conference championship in a pretty good Conference USA.
So Illinois, just a 5.5-point underdog coming off a win over Nebraska. I mean, that's a lot of respect for UTSA. And I can tell you inside the Illinois program, they do have a lot of respect. I heard somebody tell me the other day, they got some dudes. They got some dudes over there. So what'd you think of that line that I'm seeing from all the odds makers is 5.5?
I was shocked when I saw it open. I think open at 7, and then I saw it went off, and I was assuming that had to do with Illinois' quarterback situation. But to see it at 5.5, I mean, that just, to me, that says there's a significant amount of UTSA people trying to figure in on the upset this weekend. And yeah, like it is very respectful for UTSA. I mean, I just off the top, I would have expected Illinois to be maybe a double-digit favorite at home coming off that big win. So a lot of respect for the Roadrunners. I think that comes with, running back Sincere McCormick, who's had back-to-back All-American seasons, getting some run and some pre-draft stuff going on this season. So it's just it's very respectable. And, can UTSA answer that call and be competitive in this game? I think that's the big question we're going to find out Saturday.
You mentioned that what a great name for a running back, Sincere McCormick. Last year, 2nd team All-American. First year, I think a freshman All-American. Has put together some huge stats his first 2 years. What makes him such an effective running back that Illinois got to worry about?
He has all the tools of an all-purpose back that you see at the next level. I mean, he's shifty. He has good vision. He makes decisions like fantastic timing. He waits for his blockers, and he has the speed. If there's one thing he's lacking next level is, sub 4.5 speed. I mean, look at all these running backs that get drafted there, in the 4.4s. And I think he's right now 4.5. And that's something he's really tried to work on. He's a little leaner this year. I think he dropped 10 pounds in the offseason, and he's trying to get that speed up. So also, he's just a workhorse. He's been durable. I mean, there were times they gave him the ball 30 times consecutive games last year. And I know they don't want to do that as much this season, but they know he can do that, and that to have that workhorse to be able to do that, that's a lot. That's a lot for a program like UTSA.
Yeah, Frank Harris, their quarterback, also a dual threat. And Illinois did pretty well against one of those last week. And Adrian Martinez, obviously a very talented guy, but obviously Nebraska didn't have a running back like Sincere McCormick on their roster. So how do those two play off each other, and what makes Frank Harris a problem for teams?
Well, you said it, the dual threat capability. I mean, he is a legitimate threat to break free and take it to the house on any play, just because of his athletic ability, his speed, the way he's able to cut, his vision. I mean, he has helped UTSA and saved UTSA in several games where, to be honest, the offensive line hadn't played that good, whether they had injuries or guys out with COVID. I mean, he was able to save them. Now, when it comes to Frank Harris, the question is, what's his passing ability going to be? What happens when teams stack the box and make you throw over the top? So in the past, he's had issues with accuracy and decision-making in the passing game, but, he's been healthy probably the last 9 months, 10 months, the most healthiest he's been in his career. And, he's gotten better with his accuracy. He's pretty accurate passer, and they don't ask him to do too much. And he plays within the offense and, just not make too many mistakes. I think if he's able to hit a few guys, a few deep threats every now and then, it'll keep the offense honest. The defense is honest.
Yeah, Illinois went a lot of man against Adrian Martinez, basically said, we're going to spy you, make sure you don't beat us with your legs, make sure the running game doesn't hurt us, and hey, beat us over the top. And Adrian Martinez missed a few opportunities. I will say, so I think it's going to be something similar against Frank Harris, I would assume, maybe with some wrinkles. But UTSA does have at least one receiver that would worry me, and that's Zachary Franklin. I watched that bowl game, JJ, and he's a legit wideout, maybe better than or as good as anything Nebraska threw out at Illinois. But who are the weapons that Frank Harris will be looking at other than Sincere McCormick?
Yeah, he's the number one weapon. I mean, him and Joshua Cephas are the two top wide receivers, and I mean, both of those guys had fantastic seasons last year. They can both stretch the offense vertical. They're both good in space. Yards after contact, both of them have been working on that pretty strongly. So there's a new wide receiver, a Houston transfer, Travion Bradley, that cracked the starting lineup. He's the one newcomer on the depth chart on the starting lineup. So a lot of proven commodities for UTSA. They think they're returning 21 of 22 starters and something like 90% of guys that played significant snaps last season. So there aren't a lot of surprises. I think one guy I'd mention is the second running back behind Sincere McCormick. His name is Brendan Brady. He's kind of a change of pace back. They're going to try to get the ball into his hands in space, maybe in the passing game, maybe pitches, tosses, maybe even like option plays, So a couple of different weapons. And I think we're going to see a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. They got a pretty deep tight end room. They got two guys at tight end, Oscar Carnes and Leroy Watson. They really like. They didn't put up big numbers last year, but they like their blocking ability, and they both have soft hands. So a lot of different guys. Nobody really jumps out at the stat sheet if you look at it, because they spread the ball around a lot. But a lot of talent on the offensive side for sure.
JJ, one thing we know about Brett Bielema teams is usually they win the trenches. And I thought for the last 3 quarters, the offensive line won the trenches against Nebraska. I think for the entire game, the Illinois defensive line won the trenches. So UTSA, what do they have on the offensive line? What do they have on the defensive line? And do you think they can compete with Illinois there?
We talked with Jeff Traylor about that this morning, actually, at practice. And, usually that all games come down to what happens in the trenches. But I think specifically in this game, because both teams are pretty similar in the style of play they want to have, obviously, Illinois did it a little bit better in week 0 than we've seen from UTSA, but that's where UTSA wants to end up eventually, being able to, pound the running game, be selective with their offense. So, the Roadrunners have pretty good continuity on their offensive line. They have their same 5 starters from a team that went 3-0 in November. Last season, they had to shuffle guys around, I think 8 different combinations of starting offensive linemen. So they're pretty healthy right now, the starters, and they have, that continuity that there's nothing you could replace that with. So they're pretty good offensively, and I don't know if they're going to be able to handle the size and physicality of Illinois' defensive line, but it's going to be a pretty good fight. On the other side of the ball, UTSA's defensive line, that's probably the deepest and most talented group of guys they have on the whole team. I mean, they're too deep. Depth chart this week had 3 guys, and in some spots they could have had a 4th guy if they wanted to. So across the front 7, including the linebackers, the outside linebacker, I mean, they have 3 guys, 3 deep at each position. So I don't know that we're going to see, 1 or 2 guys have really big games and big numbers and huge sacks and tackles, but we are going to see a lot of guys play. So that's to keep them fresh, because, you mentioned the fourth quarter. That's when it comes down to it. That's where the battle is really at.
Yeah, there's a couple names on the front line that I remember because I looked at them for Illinois. Could they get them in the transfer portal? Lamont McDougal out of West Virginia. Charles Wiley was a 4-star prospect that played at Ole Miss. And I know Dantzler and Bell have played well for them as well. So that's an interesting group. I mean, Nebraska's front 4 was pretty good last week, but Illinois' offensive line kind of settled in after a bad first quarter. How about the back end? What do they have at linebacker and DB? And I know one of these guys made the freaks list for Bruce Feldman, and I looked at his raw numbers, and surely is pretty impressive. But what do they got in that back 7 there?
So in the linebacker, they got 2 inside linebackers that are pretty good. Trevor Harmonson and Jamal Ligon. He was a freshman last year, kind of thrust into action, and he ended up, putting up some big tackle numbers. So those 2 guys, they're pretty set with those 2 guys. On you mentioned the freaks list. That's Tariq Wulan, who coincidentally was a wide receiver converted from the offense to the defense, and last year he played pretty good. It was his first full season at cornerback. I think he had 1 interception and maybe dropped 3. And a lot of people don't understand he had a broken arm. He played with a club and a cast the entire season. So legit, 4.5 speed, tall, lengthy, could cover, and, has really just worked on his, technique and, positioning with cornerback. So he's gonna have a breakout season, I believe, and become one of the all conference type of players. And then on the very back end, you can't mention probably the leader of the entire team, much less the defense, is Rashad Wisdom. An all conference safety, kind of down the hill type of guy, a little bit undersized, but has speed, and he makes up with, what he lacks in size with his instincts and, honestly, tenacity. So, a good group across the board there.
They got good specialists too, right? I mean, because Nebraska was a train wreck on special teams, and Illinois is really good there. But I'm looking at the depth chart, and their kicker punter, pretty good combo as well.
Yeah, two All-Americans there. I think the punter is friends with the Illinois punter, 2 Aussie guys. So it's that's certainly a weapon. They brought back their All-American place kicker, who was almost perfect last season, and is just, he was a walk-on turned scholarship guy. And just special teams is they emphasize it a ton, and I think they want to get better in some of the return game aspect stuff. But the specialists themselves, I mean, they're the best in our conference.
Yeah. So JJ, what do they like to do offensively? I mean, the little I saw from the bowl game, it was zone read option, right? Like make that defensive end commit. Like, is that basically what they do? Like, what do they try to do offensively?
Right. They like the inside run stuff as well, but you're going to see a lot of zone read, some play action. I think more this year. If there's one position they're a little shallow in, it's slot wide receiver. So I think we're going to see a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight end set stuff, and that's going to help with blocking. And like I said, the Roadrunners are deep on the offensive line, and this is probably the deepest, most talented group they've had. But once you get past the first 5 guys, there aren't a lot of guys with a lot of playing experience. So, with that, if there's an injury or something, that's always going to change things, and they may shuffle stuff around. And I think their 2 backup centers might be banged up right now. So there's always a concern there, but they want to play fast. Last year we saw them go with this turbo offense a little bit, then they slowed it down, and it just kind of depends the flow of the game and what the offensive coordinator tries to do in different situations. But a lot of zone read stuff, I think.
Yeah, defensively, that's a 3-4 that they line up in. What do they do there? Like, what's their identity on that side?
That's kind of a mystery, because last year they had a coordinator that was very aggressive, that got relieved of his duties at the end of the season, and they turned it over to, now they have 2 co-defensive coordinators who called the last 3 games and the bowl game last year. So it's really an unknown, to be honest with you. We saw it seemed like they were trying to kind of find an identity those last few games, but they're aggressive with the front 7 guys. They don't play a lot of man. They'll mix in some zone, and it just they're going to rotate guys in and out on the front 7. And you mentioned guys like Chuck Wiley and McDougal, and there's another guy, Jalen Haynes, at the defensive tackle guys. Those guys are going to take up space and kind of be a menace. But I think they're just going to try and stick to their base stuff and get stuff done there, because I do think that if there's one place they're kind of susceptible is maybe to the long ball. We've seen that and several times over the last few games. So I mean, I think they're still honestly searching for an identity on the defense.
All right, JJ, for UTSA to pull off this win, they beat Baylor in Matt Rule's first year, and we know how big of a rebuild job that was, but that's a big win for them. To do that again at Illinois in the first year under Brett Bielema, what will have to happen?
There's been a few times over the years they've been close. I think there was a game against Arizona. They led in the fourth quarter and they let it slip away. So, I mean, you have to play clean. I mean, honestly, they say that the biggest jump is between the first game and the second game, and that's because of the rust factor. And UTSA there's no substitute for that game speed and all that stuff. So it's going to be a hostile environment. I think most of all the games last year UTSA played on the road were in front of no fans or 0 fans. So I mean, there's going to be a big crowd in Illinois. So just dealing with all that and the first game jitters. They got to play clean. They got to be able to run the ball, win the battle in the trenches, and not have those turnovers. Those are the game-changing things we see. So, I think we'll see. We'll be in for a close one, but I don't know if the Roadrunners are going to be able to pull it out this week.
What is concerning UTSA about Illinois? Like, obviously they don't know. Like they haven't played a game. Illinois at least has played a game, has a little confidence after a big win. Like, what concerns UTSA about Illinois, whether it's personnel or whatnot?
I think it's just the overall physicality that Illinois plays with, and that's what UTSA wants to get to. But at the end of the day, that wears on your team, especially a defense towards the end of the game. And just being able to keep up. UTSA is going to want to run the ball. So is Illinois. And is UTSA going to be able to do that against Illinois' defense? Are they going to be? Is the Roadrunners going to be able to stop the run when they need to? So, just the overall physicalness of this game, I think, is a big concern.
JJ Perez, InsideTheRunners.com. Great stuff, man. And that's a fun program to cover, fun coach to cover. And they got some fun players as well. Can't wait to see them up at UTSA, and can't wait to see you too, man. Should be a fun game. And we'll see if it's fun for Illinois to bring UTSA. They have a history of bringing up teams right when they get great, like Louisiana Tech and USF. Like, just as those teams are getting good, they came on the schedule. So maybe UTSA has got a little surprise for Illinois.
Who knows? We'll see. I'll see you guys on Saturday.